Hello and welcome to Melee's Turnwheel, the series that takes a retroactive look at the Fire Emblem series chapter by chapter. I'm your host, I'm Melee Kirby, and today we're taking it back to chapters 3.9, 3.10, and 3.11 of Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn. And this is like my 8th or 9th attempt at starting the episode. I can't quite seem to come up with a good opener for this one. I think part of it is that the chapters we're going to be talking about this episode aren't like that good, but they're also not that bad either. They're just like this weird middle ground where I don't particularly like or dislike them. Obviously I'll get more into detail about how I feel and why I feel that way as we go through. But yeah, I don't know. It's I'm excited to get through this so that we can get to the end of part 3 and getting into part 4 stuff, because I'm really looking forward to some of those chapters, but these ones, I'm kind of just ticking some boxes here, so if I seem unenthused, that's probably why, but I'll do my best to give my usual my usual breakdown on how I feel about these chapters. As far as the question goes, I'm recording this episode a little bit sooner than I usually do relative to the last one going out. So my apologies if you haven't had a chance to write in yet, and you usually do. I will try to make sure that any episodes or any answers that get submitted before I upload the episode get put in editing or whatever. But no promises. In the meantime, I do have 2 responses to read to you guys, both from Spotify comment. From Solaris, he says, I think Sacred Stones has a couple of really solid boss combos. I'm not a huge fan of how much Joshua is hidden behind a Joshua v. Calic, but it's undeniably good. Ephraim versus Leon is short but has excellent use of ellipses to set the tone. Engages Diamant versus Morian also hits hard. A one-sided conversation from a prince staring down his fallen father. All of those answers are really good. I actually, when I was phrasing the question, I was thinking about some of my favorites. Leon and Ephraim from the end of Sacred Stones is one of my all-time favorites as well. I'm going to agree with you there. I think that one's fantastic. They also followed up saying that Blue Lock, I mentioned last episode that I was reading Blue Lock and watching Lupin the Third, and they said that both of those were very good. So I'm especially excited to get further in Lupin. I know Lupin Part 2 is considered to be like even better than Part 1. And I know it's not really like a series that you have to watch in order, but I figured might as well, right? Part 1 is pretty short, and I think it does a good job of like establishing, well, my thought at least is that it does a good job of, I wouldn't have known without watching it first, I guess. It does a good job establishing these characters and sort of giving me an idea of what to expect going into the later content with them, giving me a baseline, I guess. So, I'm excited to continue with that. And then Blue Lock, I don't think I've read any more Blue Lock since I put out that last episode. I got to read more. From Josh Jansen 11, no surprises here, probably the final fight between Ike and the Black Knight. Their relationship is superb. Yes, that is also a really good boss conversation that I am expecting actually to talk about when we get there, because I'm going to read it. I don't remember it super well at the top of my head. I remember liking it and thinking that it was good. I just don't remember any of the specifics, so I'm excited to see that again when we get there at the end of the game. From Darkray via email, hey Melee, best boss conversation, Joshua and Calic. It's a big nostalgia hit seeing it for the first time as a kid. Always wanted more of their backstory together. That's a great one. I'm a big fan of both of the sort of famous boss conversations from Chapter 15 of FE8. They're both pretty cool. The Cormag and Volter being the other one. I think both of those conversations are neat. But Calic and Joshua, well, they have a slightly different one. I assume you mean the Erica route one. I think that's the one that most people talk about. So, they added a little note here afterwards too that I thought was worth pointing out. Your comments on Howl reminded me to let you know I put Corrosion on Har and had him at level 18 Dragon Lord with an Iron Axe, and anything he didn't kill just didn't have a weapon left. It was an easy EXP farm trick. It also surprisingly triggered more than expected. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad people are writing in with their experiences about this stuff, because I always say, right, like, if I'm giving gameplay advice that you disagree with, then please feel free to correct me or offer your own perspective. And I think it's really cool to see, that people are doing that, because, yeah, I can't lie to you guys and say that I've ever used corrosion in a playthrough of Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn. I haven't. But hey, it's cool to see that people are getting use out of it. Maybe one day I will. I think maybe it could be a fun thing to try, especially maybe on characters like Ike, who were stuck at, EXP or level cap 20 for a good chunk of the game, right? Because then I don't have any incentive to promote them because I can't. Yeah, food for thought. Maybe I'll do it next time, because I do already want to play this game again. I think I've already mentioned that in a couple of episodes, but I already want to play Radiant Dawn again for like the 13th or 14th time. Who knows? My voice feels a little strained today. I'm not entirely sure why. I might be coming down with something, I guess. I don't know, but it feels a little bit coarser than usual, I guess. Anyway, Josh Jansen did include a little bit of a follow-up question in their response. What are the odds you'll do a review episode of Fortune's Weave after it comes out? Very excited for it. And the short answer is that it depends. If you guys remember, I don't know if Josh Jansen was a listener back then, but when Engage came out, I was very confident that I would be doing an episode dedicated to Engage, a little bit after it came out. So my plan was to play it, and I give my initial thoughts on it and then go from there, I guess. What ended up happening is that I played the game and I didn't like it very much. And so I wanted to give it a replay, and sort of engage with the mechanics a little bit more, get a better understanding of maybe how I should have been playing the game the first time around, and maybe I wasn't, maybe I did something wrong or didn't want to meet the game on its own terms, whatever. But it took so long for me to work up the motivation to replay the game that by the time I did, it was like a year after the game came out, so there wasn't really much point in doing it anymore. So I guess the long and short of it is that it'll depend on how much I like the game when I finally get around to playing it. Considering it seems like it's going to be a pretty long game, you can do all four of the we know now that you can do all four of the heroes' stories in parallel, like at the same time. So I do plan to do that. So it'll probably end up being a very long first playthrough. So hopefully, if I enjoy it well enough, I'll probably do an episode on it. Relatively short order after I finish my first playthrough, if I had to guess. But I can't guarantee that I will do that, because if I don't like the game for whatever reason, then I might not end up feeling, interested enough in talking about it. I'm not sure. Time will tell. Okay, and before moving on to the question that I want to pose to you, actually, no, I'll do that right now, because this is a good segue, talking about Fortune's Weave. I didn't have a question prepped for this time around, but I like anything based on the chapters that we're playing today. So it's a good thing that this is a timely question to be asking you guys. With all the information we're getting about Fortune's Weave, especially, well, I'm shit, wait, hold on. Okay, so the question I was going to ask was, which character are you picking for your first playthrough? Now we know that you don't actually have to choose between any of the four. But I guess, let me phrase it this way. Which protagonist are you expecting, or which route are you expecting to be your favorite? Or maybe which, before you knew that you didn't have to pick, which were you leaning towards? What would you have chosen? What do you think is going to end up being your favorite? Something to that effect, I guess. Which route are you most excited for, I guess is probably a good way to phrase it. Let me know your thoughts at Kirby, Twitter and Blue Sky, Spotify comment, or turnwheelpodcast@gmail.com. And I'll read them out in the next episode. Now, there is one thing that I wanted to get to before we get into the chapters. Prior to the last episode going out, one of our regular listeners / writers in Darkray wrote in with a question completely unrelated to the previous response. which was I was excited to see because I have encouraged you guys. If you have any general questions or thoughts that you guys want to share with me for me to talk about, I'd be happy to do so. And so I was happy to see that that they had written in with something for me to chew on a little bit. What they asked was, I was wondering if going forward you could talk about your philosophy for when to promote units. So this seems like more of a general request to include it in my like unit and gameplay analyses, which I can absolutely do. I think in general it depends a lot on the game, because in GB, I would say, excuse me, in GBA I would say that my personal philosophy is to promote around level 15-ish. And in general, whenever you feel like you need a boost to your stats more than anything, right? Like it's really just kind of going off of the vibe. Each individual unit might have like a particularly good time to promote. I don't know if I'll go into that nitty gritty with it, but I can definitely talk about it game by game. They mentioned Awakening as being a game where they tend to promote early, or they think that you're supposed to promote early in that game. And I will admit that Awakening is not my best game in terms of like my knowledge of how to play optimally by any stretch. So I might be a little bit off base here, but I would say that promoting relatively early is a good idea. Just because of the way that levels work in Awakening, you're not really losing all that much by promoting early, right? Because if you want to reclass or whatever, and the optimal strategy is to reclass into different classes, maybe even like multiple times to try to get as many levels out of it as you can, then promoting early seems to be the way to go in Awakening. But we'll talk more about that when we get there. In general, I can definitely include a little bit more of my thoughts on that. Although it's not particularly relevant for Tellius, since for the most part, it's like either get them to level 21, or if there's if you want to save on bonus experience or combat experience, you can get them to level 20 and then use a Master Crown so you don't have to waste that last level's worth of experience. But I would say there's not really much incentive to promote early in for most characters in these games. There are a couple where I think it's probably a good idea. Torineo is a pretty good one. There's really no reason not to promote him early, especially if you're not planning on using him in the long term. But even if you are, like, I still think it's probably for the best. Let's see. If you got if she was promotable with a Master Crown, I think Mist would be another good contender for that. Har, probably. Although by the time you get a Master Crown to be able to give him, he's probably already level 21 just naturally anyway. So, yeah, not a lot of good cases for promoting early in Tellius, but there are some out there. Let me know if you can think of any more. Okay, and with that out of the way, I think we can go ahead and get into our chapters for the episode, starting with chapter 3-9, Marauders. We once again switch perspectives. We are playing now again as the Crimean Royal Knights and looking at things from Alencia and Joffrey's perspective. And what's going on in Crimea right now is relatively straightforward. Gallia has successfully escaped back to the Laguz Alliance, rather, has escaped back to Gallia. And before they have time to collect themselves and figure out what to do next, Benyon wants to invade Gallia. And in order to do that, at least in the way that they want to, they need to go through Crimea. And so Benyon sends a request to Crimea saying, hey, we want to go through your land, and while you're at it, please give us supplies and troops to help our cause. And Crimea says no. And Benyon gets pissed off and decides that they're going to do it anyway. They're going to march through, going wherever they need to go, and taking what they need from the citizenry along the way. And so, because they're causing conflict and turmoil for the citizens of Crimea, Alencia dispatches Joffrey and the Royal Knights to put a stop to it, essentially. And so that's what we're doing. We get to the base as Joffrey prepares to go stop Benyon. We get some base conversations here that I'd like to talk about. One of them gives you money, and then one of them gives you a master crown, which I would highly recommend using on Joffrey, more or less immediately if you would want to. There's really no reason not to. He is one of the few. I forgot about him a second ago. He is one of the few legitimately really good use cases for it. Because he's going to be really helpful in this upcoming map. We want him to be as strong as possible, but then we're not going to use him really again at all until late part 4. So there's not much point in trying to get him up the old-fashioned way. The money you get is, I think, 10,000. And then there's 2 conversations I wanted to talk about for their narrative implications. One of them is pretty straightforward, and I actually almost decided to not talk about this one, but it has a little bit to chew on that I think is interesting. Joffrey goes to collect Makalov, who is in a bar, trying to avoid his responsibilities, basically. The actual reasons aren't that important. It's just Makalov being Makalov. You know how it is. Astrid, once again, is running defense for him. And it's at this point I'd like to note that I made a mistake in the previous the episode about part 2, because I mentioned that there was a conversation here that was mistranslated, and Astrid mentions not having siblings when she actually should have a bunch. I said that was in part 2. It's actually here. Not that it really matters, but I just figured I'd correct myself while we're here anyway. But what I think is interesting about this is that this is the closest that we ever get to Astrid giving a reason why she likes Makalov. She says that he stays calm under pressure and that he's cool and collected, and that is for her, in her perspective, what makes for an ideal knight is someone who can stay calm under difficult circumstances. And sure, I guess. I mean, I'm not going to interrogate this, right? I already talked a little bit in the previous Crimea episode about why I don't think this relationship dynamic makes any sense. I don't care much about Astrid or Makalov, so it doesn't really bother me at all. But it is just very silly. And I think that their attempt here to give a reason why she would like him is, I mean, it's appreciated, right? I guess it's better than nothing, but it still doesn't make a whole lot of sense if you ask me. But what do I know? Maybe some people really like the Astrid Makalov ship. I don't think so. I don't think I've met a single person who actually stands that relationship. But, maybe I'm wrong. Okay. I skipped over the bargain. There's not really much here. That's not true. There is something really cool here. It is a scroll for Adept. Which is a great skill. I highly recommend picking that up if you have the money to afford it. You get money for it in this base conversation. So unless you really want, a steel Great Lance, there's not much reason to not just buy it now. You should definitely pick it up if you can. I didn't get one of these, nor would I particularly recommend it. But you can also buy a shine barrier here. And I cannot for the life of me remember if I've ever talked about a shine barrier before. They are effectively the same as an item that we saw all the way back in FE7 called a light rune, I think is what it was called. It is an item that you can place down on a particular tile, and that tile becomes impassable terrain for as long as the shine barrier is active. And it can have niche applications in certain maps. This one coming up, I can kind of see it, but I don't think that it would be... I don't think it would be that useful, to be honest. There's a couple narrow walkways and choke points that you could maybe use it on, but I think overall it's probably more of a hassle than it's worth. I don't actually know how many turns it lasts. When the enemies use them, they seem to last the entire map, but I don't think that that's true if you use them, because that would be a really easy way to soft lock yourself, and I don't think that they would let you do that, but maybe they do. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure. Oh, there is one base conversation that I missed. I apologize. I might edit this to be in the proper order, or I might just not bother because it doesn't matter all that much. But we haven't left the base yet, so let me talk about this base conversation. So I think it's just a 1-star conversation. We don't get anything out of this. It's just to show sort of where the average Crimean citizens land on this issue, because as they talk amongst themselves, it becomes very clear that they're split sort of down the middle about whether to side with whether they want Crimea to side with Benyan or to side with Gallia, or to remain neutral, I guess. That seems to be what they land on. At the end, they all just kind of say, wow, I really just don't want to fight anybody. We could just not fight anybody. That'd be great. But we have some people saying like, no, I'd rather team up with the Beorc, to fight against the Lagus, because I'd rather be with my own kind, that sort of deal. But then a couple people point out very rightfully, well, we've been close with Gallia for a while now. There's Gallian people who came and helped us rebuild after we won the war. They specifically reference Mordecai, actually, and a couple people say that he was really big and kind of intimidating at first, but he was really good with the children, and they all really liked him. So it seems like it's good to have conversations like this. There's been quite a number of these throughout both Tellius games that sort of give an idea of where the people outside of the ones that we're actively like playing as and seeing their conversations super frequently, where the average person in these areas lands, how they feel about certain things. And so despite everything that Alencia's father fought for, that Alencia herself has fought for, and what the people of Gallia have really put themselves out there to try to achieve, there are still a huge number of Crimeans, seemingly, who just don't care and would rather side with Benyan because they're better Beorc than Lagus, at the end of the day. And, that's kind of disheartening. But on the other hand, it also goes to show that a lot of people have been affected by what everybody has done. Probably more people would side with Gallia now than before the events of Path of Radiance. So that's something, I guess. Okay, so we're here at the actual map, and it's an interesting one. I'll say that much. So the goal here is to get to the end. We start at the bottom left, and our goal is over at the top right. And we need to kill the boss. It is a kill boss map. And there's a couple ways that we can get there. The mounted units have to go down a lower path and up and around through a couple buildings. Essentially take the long way around. But there are ledges that either Marcia can fly up, or Danved and Khalil can climb up, or some of our yellow units to go and take a little bit of a shortcut. I don't know how much of a shortcut it is, but it's an alternative way to go, basically. There is a side objective that they've included in this map that I think is pretty cool. Essentially, some of the enemy units can light buildings on fire. They're only certain enemies that can do this. They're labeled as soldiers, which is the tier 1 class. So they're relatively weak compared to the rest of the guys that we're fighting at this point. Compared to the Crimean Royal Knights, maybe not super weak, but we'll get to that. It's basically, it gives you incentive to rush down certain enemies while being conscious of making sure you're not putting yourself in the range of too many other enemies. While the buildings are on fire, if you end the map with buildings on fire, you don't get as much bonus experience because you get a certain number per house that's intact. And then if the house is on fire for enough turns, I think it's like 2 or 3, then it burns down completely, and there's no longer any way to save it. If it's just on fire, you can put it out. You can walk up to it with any units. Any of your yellow units actually can do the same, and I think they will prioritize that as one of their actions. They'll run up to the building and extinguish the fire, and that's fine. If it's, as long as it's not on fire when the map ends, you will get full bonus experience. There's 3 or 4 of the soldiers. and then maybe like 5 or 6 buildings that they can light up. So, decent, healthy chunk of bonus experience here if you can be a little bit on top of it. I like this map a little bit more this time around. I never actually realized until I was looking into it this playthrough that it had to be specific enemy units that did it. I assumed that any red unit in this map could do that, and that only, some just chose not to sometimes for whatever reason. I wasn't really entirely sure how that worked. But now that I know, I think it's a little bit better because you can just focus down the ones that are going to cause you problems before they can get away, which is nice. I like being able to do that. Overall, I would say that this map is not that good, and I feel kind of, I feel like this argument I'm about to make is a little bit ironic, right? Because I feel about this map how I know some people feel about 3-6, the Dawn Brigade map, and the later Dawn Brigade maps that we haven't gotten to yet, in the sense that you are given a handful of units that are, all things considered, pretty fucking bad, right? I mean, yes, we have Joffrey. Joffrey's killing it, right? We also have Kieran, who's probably going to be pretty good. But then you have Khalil, you have Makalov, you have Astrid, you have Danved. My Marcia was pretty good for this run-through because I've been actively training her. But in most circumstances, you're probably not going to have a trained Marcia. And so, yeah, it's not, I mean, like, you're actively disincentivized from giving her kills in most of the maps that she's in part 2. So, unless you've been giving her bonus experience, like me, then she's probably going to end up being pretty underwhelming as well. So we got 2 good units to work with. And what I think makes this map not particularly great, whereas I really sung the praises of 3-6, is that in 3-6, it leaned into the idea that you have bad units by encouraging you, and in some cases requiring you, to play defensively, and by giving you that out in the Black Knight, right, when you actually had to turn the tables and start fighting aggressively. It gave you an option to do that without risking your units. In this chapter, you were much more incentivized to play aggressively. You don't have to, unless you don't, like, if you don't care about bonus experience, then you can play this map at whatever pace you want. But it's not ideal for you to do that, because then the houses are going to get burned down. You're not going to get the turn requirements, which I don't remember what they are. Let me check. You get full bonus experience for doing it in 10 turns and half for 15. So yeah, if you don't, and that's like a very generous turn count. The map's pretty small. I was actually taking it more slowly this time around than I ever had before, I think. And I ended up doing it with at least 2 turns to spare. I'll explain why I was taking it so slowly in a second. But yeah, in general, I think the map just kind of feels very unsatisfying to play. And most of the units we have at this point just have really terrible game feel. And if you're gonna try to beat this map, in the easy way with the least amount of headaches possible, you're just gonna end up spamming Joffrey at everything, which, that's fine, whatever. But it doesn't really make for very exciting gameplay. I do like the side objective, and it's nice that you have a reason to play a little bit quickly. I just wish, give us Lucia. I think it would have actually gone a long way if we got to play as Lucia in this chapter. There's really no reason not to let that be a thing. She's around. I don't get why she didn't just send her with us, and she would have been, she has pretty good stats for this point in the game still, so I think that would have been another option. Letting us play as Alencia probably would have been a little much. I think it would have been fun, but yeah, it I can understand why they didn't allow that. But Lucia would have absolutely been fine, I think. Especially, to compensate for how many units we've lost at this point, because Braum and Nephany aren't here, the Lagus aren't here, Har isn't here. So, yeah, I definitely think that we needed something to bolster us a little bit more. The boss itself is pretty easy. Actually, before I start talking about the boss, I want to talk about the hidden items in this chapter, or the items in general. There are 2 noteworthy items that you can get for this map. One of them is a speed wing. It's just dropped by one of the enemy halberdiers, so you can just kill that guy. He drops it. It's not a big deal. The other one is a spirit dust. The spirit dust is a hidden item on this map. And as far as I can tell, there are only two ways to get it, because it's behind the boss. It's on a tile that the boss is blocking, and you can't, like, the boss does not move, so you can't bait him out. Instead, what you have to do is you need to have Marcia fly around to the spot behind the boss and hope that she gets it, and that she doesn't get owned by the boss. Or you can kill the boss, and then if you do that with enough with enough movement to canto onto the tile behind him, then you can try to get it with like Joffrey or Kieran or whatever. And I didn't end up getting it. That's the second one is what I tried. I tried to kill him with Joffrey. That's why it was taking so long, because a lot of the enemies around him are really annoying and body block him in ways that are frustrating. So I had to take a couple extra turns to position myself properly. But I put Joffrey in a position where he could kill the boss and then canto onto the tile, and nothing doing. I didn't get it, which is fine. It's just a spirit dust. It would have been nice for money, but I don't actually. There's no one in that really benefits from having a higher magic stat in this game. I'm not using any mages, I don't think, at all, so not really a big deal. It's just a very weird choice to put that there. I don't know what they were thinking. Especially since we don't have another unit that we've lost now is Heather, so it's a strange decision, but whatever. It's not like Heather wouldn't be able to get to it anyway unless you picked her up with Marcia, dropped her behind the boss, and then like hoped that she survived a turn, and then had her get it after that. I think that's like the only way that would work, and it's not very reliable. So. Okay, that should be it. There's one thing I wanted to say about the boss. I've every time I've played this game, I've always kicked myself, because I've always been like, damn, I should try to remember to get Joffrey to a speed threshold where he can one round KO this boss with his Brave Lance. In order to do that, Joffrey needs 27 speed, which is a pretty tall order. Just going off of base level Joffrey and giving him the Master Crown, it's not going to get him there. So I would recommend definitely, if you want to do this, you definitely need to give him some bonus experience, which you should have plenty. I still had a lot from, I guess, the earlier Part 2 maps. I think, though, that's the bonus experience that it's pulling from. So yeah, it wasn't really a big deal for me. But yeah, the 27 speed is the number that he needs to hit, because the boss has 23 speed on normal mode, I should say. It's not really a big deal if you can't do it. It just it saves a little bit of hassle and a little bit of time. Although I ended up playing the map really slowly anyway, so it probably didn't end up mattering at all. And that bonus experience would have maybe been better served on Marcia. But whatever, what can you do? So Joffrey cleans up and has gotten, the attention of Benyon. Alencia has made a point very clear. We're not just going to take this sitting down. So she arranges for a meeting between herself and the Benyon senator leading this whole operation, who is Senator Valtome, who we've met, I think, once before. I don't remember. He came up in the last episode. He's in charge of Zelgius right now. They put him as Zelgius's direct commander, essentially. And so he's just very disrespectful to Alencia. He only sees Crimea as like a suzerain state of Benyon at the end of the day. He doesn't, recognize their political autonomy as a country. And so he basically just says, like, stop playing games, little girl, you're going to give me what I want. But she doesn't back down. And eventually, he fucks off and says whatever. Zelgius at that point steps in, and he's a lot more reasonable. He treats Alencia with respect, and apologizes for Valtome's actions. But ultimately he ends up kind of trying to strong arm Alencia as well, and saying, listen, we won't bother anybody. We won't take anything from the citizens of Crimea, but you are going to let us through. Otherwise, there's going to be a problem, like we're going to have to fight. And Alencia is kind of left without really a whole lot of options. and we don't really get a chance to see what she decides to do in this moment, but we're going to circle back to that next chapter. Speaking of which, I think that was everything for 3-9. So we can go ahead and move on to 3-10, which is called The Heart of Crimea. We are back once again to the Laguz Alliance. This will be the last time this episode that we bounce between. We're bouncing around so much between different perspectives, which does make sense, right? Where it's what was the name of this part? I think is Intersecting Vows. So it makes sense that we're playing a lot of we're crisscrossing a lot in our perspective on these events. But we're back with the Gallia, the Laguz Alliance, I should say. And they have successfully made it back to Gallia, just in time to find out that Benyon is marching on their borders. They have one group in the east, which is trying to come over the mountains from Benyon directly into Gallia. But more pressingly, they have the Central Army, which is in the north, marching down through Crimea. And, effectively, by the time that everybody else hears about this, it's become clear that Alencia has not prevented them from doing this. And they have, a long conversation about this. Skrimir being really the only person in the room who hasn't actually met Alencia. He, kind of proposes like, oh, are they siding with Benyon? Are they betraying us? Right? Because Crimea and Gallia are supposed to be allies. So he's understandably a little bit confused and worked up over what's going on. Every single other person in the room, I mean, they say for a little bit, like, Crimea is in a little bit of a tough situation. They're not, they probably don't have, a lot of say in the matter right now. They have to tread carefully, but they're not outright defending Crimea at the same time, right? Like they're being very like measured about the whole thing. At some point, I don't actually really remember what the shift in the conversation is, but at some point everybody just starts talking about how cool Alencia is. Fucking everybody. Kanegas, Ranulf, Ike, Soren, like everybody there is like, yeah, Alencia is the GOAT. She would never betray Crimea. We can she never betray Gallia. We can guarantee you that she's not going to. They come to the conclusion that at the very least, Crimea is not going to help Benyon. They might not hinder them, but they're not going to help Benyon either, which is, about as much as can reasonably be expected given the circumstances. So with that all sorted out, they need to figure out what they're going to do next. And the plan essentially boils down to, we can't let them get us in this pincer attack, right? Because they're trying to come at us from both the east and the north. And if they do that, we're screwed. So we gotta pick one and just go after them, and try to fight them head on. That's our best bet right now. Now, I think this is a little bit contrived. Not that I think it's a bad idea necessarily, but they don't spend a lot of time, as much as I think they probably should have, explaining the fact that, like, okay, well, 3 chapters ago from, at least 3, like, Ike chapters ago, they made it very clear that if they march head on to meet Zelgius's army, if they fight the Central Army, they're just boned. They cannot win against Zelgius and the Central Army. It's a terrible idea. And so I get why they really just need everybody to meet up in Crimea right now. That's sort of what the next part of the story is centered around. But I think it would have made a little bit more sense if they had maybe explained sort of like what's their plan of attack for dealing with Zelgius, or like why the group in the north rather than the group in the east, or whatever it may be. It seems like they've forgotten how big of a deal not getting caught by the Central Army was, like, not even that long ago. So, but that's a pretty nitpicky thing, all things considered, I think. But anyway, that's what they decide to do. They're going to march north and meet the Central Army in Crimea, and have their big, probably final. They spend a little bit of time on this, but not very much. If this is probably going to be the make or break point of the whole war, right? Like this is if Gallia loses here, then there's probably no coming back from that at that point. but it doesn't end up mattering very much, as we're going to see in a minute. So the two armies meet in Crimea, and both of them are getting ready to fight. When the Crimean army shows up, Alencia is leading the charge, and she essentially what she does is, everybody's like, oh, what's Alencia gonna do? Benyon seems to think that they're showing up to help them. Everybody on Gallia's side is a little bit unsure. They don't think she's there to help them necessarily, but they still feel very strongly that she's not going to help Benyon, so they're not entirely clear what the idea here is. So what Alencia does is that she demands everybody leaves. She resolutely says, I will not allow Crimea to be your battlefield. Everybody will turn around now. I'm not going to stop you by force, but anything short of that I will do to make sure you leave, effectively. And, both sides of the army are like, no. even the Laguz Alliance are like, you can't really expect us to do that. It's not going to work out for us. And so Alencia, to really hammer home how to show her resolve, as how strong her resolve is, she throws down her weapon, essentially leaving her unarmed and defenseless, in between two armies who are about to fight each other to the death, right? And this display of conviction is enough to convince both the Laguz Alliance and Zelgius to back off. Both of them, Tibarn actually goes up to her, and gives her a lot of commendation for how brave she is, etc. Says that he likes her gusto, or something to that effect. And so the two armies decide that they're going to turn around and go back, although it is made very clear to Alencia that, like, at some point this is going to have to break, right? But for now, at least, they're going to give her some breathing room. Not really clear. I could nitpick a couple things about the scene, right? It's not really clear, like, what Alencia's main plan here is. She's kind of just delaying the inevitable at this point, but I can understand why she would want to try, and it's good that she was able to. This is a really good moment for her. Obviously, she's willing to put her life on the line for her people, which has always been true, right? But I think it's a good moment for her to, like, show that and earn the respect of the people who at this point were pretty much just treating Crimea as, like, the Laguz Alliance even was treating it as, like, Crimea is a nice place and all, but we got to do what we got to do, sort of deal. Now, there is, of course, one person who is not moved by this in the slightest, and it is Senator Valtome. He orders his men to attack anyway. Now, it's not the entire Benyon army. All those who are loyal to Zelgius, when he gave the order to back off, they backed off. But Valtome is still around, and he decides to have his guys attack Alencia. Thankfully, some people from the Laguz Alliance are there. The Grail mercenaries and a few of the Laguz are there. Mostly just people. I mean, coincidentally, it's all the same characters we played as in the previous few maps. But basically, the justification for them being here, even after the rest of the army retreated, is that they hung back a little bit to see if they could have a chance to talk to Alencia, because it's been a little bit since they've been able to chat with her. So thankfully, they are in a position to see what Valtome is doing, and stop him. And that's how the map begins. This map is not, I kind of want to say that it's interesting, but it's not particularly, unfortunately. It's a route map, which is not, already not off to a great start. The main thrust of what's going on here is that Alencia is still in the middle of the map. She's a green unit, and she is unarmed. She doesn't have a midi on her. And so, I think her dying here is a lose condition, but like realistically, it's never gonna happen. You can have your guys on her in like a turn, and then the green units that she accompany her, like the Joffrey and the other Royal Knights that were accompanying her, they start as green units in the top left, and they make their way down pretty quickly as well. So she's not really in any danger of dying, which is good, I guess, because otherwise it'd be kind of frustrating. I think it would have been interesting if they made the first couple turns like actually a little bit threatening, to maybe incentivize you to like play a little bit more aggressively. Like, I'm trying to think about how to word this, right? Because you're gonna play aggressively, obviously. Like, there's no reason not to. But like, there's no real threat here. I don't think the gameplay experience lines up with the narrative experience that the game is trying to invoke very well. I guess is what I'm trying to say here. But I don't have a great idea for how to fix that. So maybe it's just, maybe there's no way around it. I don't entirely know, but. Now, the nice thing about this map being so straightforward is that I'm basically already done talking about it. You just beeline, most of the enemies are on the right side. There's some reinforcements that come in that are pretty easy to deal with. You just send your biggest, toughest, strongest units to the right, and have them clean shop. It's not really very complicated. You do get bonus experience, obviously for turns. It's once again 10 turns for full and 15 for, that's actually where we're going to be seeing that for a while, actually. That's the turn requirement for 3-9, 3-10, 3-11, 3 end game, 4 prologue, 4-1, 4-2. So it's a lot of maps where they have the return requirement of 10 for full, 15 for half. But this is no exception. You also get bonus experience for every Crimean green unit that survives. In my case, it maxed out at 17. One of mine died. I assume 17 is just the number that are on the map at the start. That sounds like the correct number of guys, based on what I remember. So I lost one, I think, this playthrough, so I would have gotten the bonus experience for 16 of them. It's a pretty healthy amount. It's 3,200, which is as many as you get for the max turn bonus experience. So it's you get a good amount of bonus experience this chapter. I always notice, and I think it's partially because of how much you get in this map, but then also because you get a ton from. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll talk about that in a minute. Point is, it's an easy map. It's straightforward. I don't really have much else to say about it. Oh, I did actually want to talk a little bit about something that I thought would be fun. So I after I recruited Jill to Ike's army, did I mention that I did that? I don't remember. I recruited Jill to Ike's army. I had Har go up and talk to her in 3-7. And I thought it would be fun if I actually started putting effort into using her for these last few maps of part 3. I don't know if I'll use her at all in part 4. Maybe. Probably wouldn't hurt. Now that I don't have to worry about her ruining 3-6 and 3-13, I think it could be pretty interesting, but we'll see how that goes. She's still pretty underleveled compared to the rest of my guys, so I'm not sure, but okay. I think the only other thing about this map that I wanted to talk about, it's all story related, so we'll just get it all out of the way at once. So partway through the map, we get a cutscene where one of Zelgius's men, is it Lavale, I think is his name. He's like a minor NPC that we've seen around a little bit. He tells Zelgius that Voltome is attacking Alencia, essentially. And Zelgius says, okay, he's an idiot. We are not helping him. Lavale is like, hey, should we go take a squad of guys to go give him backup? And Zelgius says, no, we're not going to do that. And then after you beat the map, Voltome flees, and as he's leaving, he says that Zelgius will pay for not coming to help him, et cetera, et cetera. And he intends to make good on his word as we cut back to the Benyon base camp, where Voltome is about to execute Zelgius, just right then and there. Even though a few Lavale in particular, speaks up and says it's a really bad idea. He's like our best general. We probably shouldn't do this. But Voltome is going to do it anyway because he's power tripping like crazy. However, just when he is about to have the executioner, do the deed, he is stopped by Sanaki. Sanaki has finally returned. She is being carried by Sigrun and Tanith, who are members of the Benyon Holy Guard, and they have Sanaki do her thing. Orders everybody to stand down, etc. She explains to everybody in attendance there that this war, basically what we already knew, right? Because this is the first time we're seeing Sanaki this game, but we basically already knew that this is what was the deal, right? This entire war was orchestrated by the Senate. More specifically, she says Duke Lacane is the sort of ringleader behind the whole operation, and that she, if for those who are loyal to her, they need to stand down, and that includes Zelgius. Zelgius is on her side. Obviously, she just saved his life. Valtome starts to talk shit about the apostle, saying that she's a fraud, that she's not, the true apostle. Then he starts to talk shit about Sephiron, which is when Zelgius steps in and starts to throttle him. Holds him up by the scruff of his neck, and says that if he keeps talking shit about Sephiron, he's gonna kill him effectively. So at this point, and we're gonna see a little bit more of the fallout of this next chapter, because I think this is basically where it ends. Right? Let me just double check my notes. Okay, so that's effectively the end of the chapter. We can go ahead and get straight into the next one because it picks up right where this one left off. Chapter 3-11 is called Just Cause, and this is where we get the overview of what's been going on from Sanaki. She explains that they received the notification from the Laguz Alliance that the Senate may be responsible for what happened with Serenus Forest, because if you remember, that's how all this started. I know it's been a little bit, but this whole war started because they pressed the Senate on answers about what the deal with the Serenus Forest massacre was, now that they have new information that may implicate them as sort of the reason why it happened. Sanaki was planning on launching a full-scale investigation into this, but before she could, the Senate basically staged a full-on coup. They imprisoned her, they imprisoned Sephiron, and started this whole war sort of without their go-ahead. They're trying to take full control of Benyon at this point. I forgot to mention, by the way, I was too eager to get into the explanation. At this point, we have transitioned to Sanaki explaining this to Ike and Kanegus and Tibarn and all of them, Alencia, the whole 9 yards. She has effectively teamed up with the Laguz Alliance. Now, as far as Benyon is concerned, the narration before this chapter explains that effectively they're split between the people who are loyal to Sanaki and the people who are loyal to the Senate. The Senate is spinning a lie that Sanaki isn't the real apostle, that she's trying to mislead them and all that, and is not generally does not have their best interests at heart. And enough people believe the Senate, where it's not like all of Benyon is suddenly on board with what Sanaki is going for. The nice thing, though, is that Zelgius is 100% on team Sanaki. One thing that I didn't actually even realize until I started giving this explanation, and then it occurred to me, I should double check this so that I can talk about it. They never explain, at least not that I can see, maybe I skimmed over it, how Sanaki escaped. Like, how did she get away from being imprisoned? I don't think they ever actually go into detail about that. That may have been one of the things that the extended script covered, that got cut. That's entirely possible. I don't think it's ultimately that big of a deal. We could just assume that Sigrun freed her or something, like she just escaped on her own merit, whatever. It doesn't really matter. The point is that she got away now, and she's here to join. I do think they should have mentioned it offhand. I just it's not the end of the world that they don't, I guess, is my point. And so now the Laguz alliance has grown even bigger, because if you're keeping track, it is now, well, it's not Kilvis anymore, I guess, but Kilvis is doing their own thing again. Incidentally, we haven't seen, despite Nesala's betrayal earlier, we have not actually gone up against any enemy ravens, interestingly. So they don't seem to be working for Benyon on like a regular basis, possibly, but it's unclear. But we have Phoenicis, we have Gallia, and we now have the portions of Benyon's army that are loyal to Senaki, including Zelgius and his immediate followers, as well as now that all this is squared away, Crimea has decided to join this alliance. And then, of course, on the other side, we have Dain, and the side of Benyon that is sticking with the senators. And then possibly Kilvis. It's not entirely clear what's going on there, but yeah, that's has me scratching my head a little bit because I actually forgot about that until just now. So we'll see. Maybe Kilvis will come up again later. I know Nesala shows up again before the end of part 3. I think. Pretty sure, but I guess we'll see. They do you're gonna see me mention this a couple times. We're entering, I think, like we're now just starting to get into the parts of part 3. The later chapters of part 3 are sort of notoriously a little bit shaky on the narrative side of things. Like the justification for certain things happening and people, doing certain things is a little bit, but I still have hope that we're gonna end things on a good note, right, guys? Surely. Listen, I know the blood contract is coming. We got one more episode. Just give me a little bit of time to come to terms with it. Okay, I'm gonna have to talk about it. I know I am. They have a few conditions for Senaki joining the army. It's basically what you'd expect, right? Like free all the Laguz in slavery, give Serenus Forest back to the Herons, etc., etc. And Senaki agrees to all of it. She's super on board with it. And so they decide to help her out. Now, here's what happens next. Now that Benyon and Crimea have joined this alliance with Gallia and Phoenicis, they need a leader. They need someone to command the army effectively. And everyone is in agreement that it should be Ike. When I say everybody, I don't think anybody has any disagreements. The main people who push for it are Senaki and Sigrun. And they effectively, they kind of screw Ike over in this sense, right? Because he doesn't want to be the leader of this army. He makes that abundantly clear. And what really strikes me about this conversation, and then we get another one at the end of the chapter that kind of ties into it as well, is that Senaki and Sigrun are being very coy, being like, oh well, I guess we've tricked you, Ike. They're treating it like a game. And Ike doesn't let on. He makes it clear. He's like, I don't want this. You're gonna make me do it anyway. That's fine, but I'm not happy about it, right? He's not fucking around with them, right? He seems genuinely pretty frustrated that they've put him in this position. And the other guys seem to just be treating it like, we're doing our devious little machinations. This is where I think we can start to see the seeds of what Ike eventually decides to do at the end of this game. For those of you who aren't aware, I think most of you probably are, but just in case some of you aren't, in every possible ending for Ike at the end of Radiant Dawn, if I'm not mistaken, he decides to leave Tellius. He just fucks off. He goes underground. Nobody ever sees or hears from him ever again, allegedly. And it's a pretty drastic move from, someone who has a lot of friends and family and connections. And seemingly he can have a paired ending with either Soren or Ranulf where they go with him. But otherwise he goes completely on his own, leaves so many people that he cares about behind. And it's definitely, a lot has been said about why he does this, and we can't know 100% for sure. There's some very reasonable speculation out there, and it's pretty heavily implied throughout, a little bit in the last game, and then especially in this one, that Ike has had enough of being a big player on the stage of Tellius. He doesn't want this. He just wants to be a guy, and the circumstances of his work, and of his life really keep leading him into positions of importance that he does not want. And this is where we start to get that from him in this game. Everything up to this point, he seemed pretty cool with. I mean, Ranulph, gave him an out. He said, we want to hire the Grail mercenaries, but listen, if you don't want to do it, that's fine. And Ike said, no, absolutely we're doing it because we're your friends, and because we think that what you're doing is right. So he doesn't seem to have a problem with that. But it really did strike me in this cutscene how, no nonsense he is, right? He's not... he's not playing this game with Sanaki and Sigrun. He's just pissed. And I don't think they really get it. Or if they do, they don't care, which is, maybe worse. But yeah, I thought that was interesting because, it's really the first time where we can get a sense of why maybe Ike made that decision in this game. I think you get a little bit in Path of Radiance as well, but in this game for sure, this is where we start to get glimmers of it. Okay, so the plan is to attack Benyon. The Zelgius and now that everything's gone to shit essentially for Benyon's army. They've retreated, those of them who are loyal to Voltome retreated, whatever. I think they probably have Voltome locked up somewhere. It doesn't matter. He ends up getting freed anyway to be a pain in our asses later. So, yeah, that's really it. They're going to march on Benyon is the initial plan. However, just as they're getting ready to do that, they get word that Dane is sort of poking at Crimea's borders, trying to cause problems. And so they say, okay, change of plans. If we're going to do this, we need to get rid of Dane first. If we don't, then they're just going to be a hassle to deal with from behind later on. And so they decide that they're going to attack Dane, and that's where we get the base conversations and the I didn't make any note of the bargain items this time around. I think same with last chapter, actually. I think it was just all Olivia grass, maybe an arm scroll somewhere in there. Doesn't really matter. There's a lot of Olivia grass, I know that. The only base conversation I wanted to make note of here was a conversation between Oscar and Kieran. It's just a nice little moment for the two of them where they bond over being rivals and all that. Oscar clearly having a lot of affection for Kieran, definitely not taking the whole rivalry thing as seriously, but wanting to make sure that Kieran is taking care of himself. And Kieran, of course, is treats everything like this big ordeal, treats everything like this challenge, right? In order to get Kieran to accept this gift that he's trying to give, which I don't even remember what the item is. I don't think it's that important. He has to frame it as this is a gift of a symbol of friendship to my eternal rival or something like that. And Kieran's like, oh, well, when you phrase it that way, I guess I have to accept. Fun stuff like that. I just think they have a good dynamic that I wanted to highlight here. As we prepare to fight against Dane, Sanaki gives Ike Ragnell. We finally have Ragnell back. And it's as good in this game as it was in Path of Radiance, probably better. And in terms of the damage numbers it has attached to it, I don't know. It doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, it's a 1-2 range weapon on Ike, who debatably his only problem as a unit is that he didn't have access to good 1-2 range options. Now he has this really high might, infinite durability 1-2 range weapon. If he wasn't unstoppable before, then he definitely is now. He's incredibly strong. So look forward to using that on him. It's a little bit they managed it comes from Sigrun and Sanaki, so it does make sense why they would have it. It feels a little bit unceremonious in terms of how he gets it, but I guess it's fair enough. Okay, so we're on the map now, and let me tell you, You're in for a treat. If you've played Path of Radiance, you'll recognize this right away. It's bridge map time, baby. So in Path of Radiance, there is a notoriously bad map. Where you were on a bridge, you were on the right side of the bridge trying to work your way into the left side of the bridge, and along the way there are pitfalls that will, if you walk over them as a part of your movement for the turn, you will fall into them, you will lose your action for the turn, you will be paralyzed and have to wait until next turn to get out of the hole, and then those holes serve as permanent barriers for the rest of the map that people can't cross over, requiring you to move, in weird ways that may, be more inconvenient or funnel you in directions that you don't want to go, or just generally waste your time. That's really what it boils down to, is that they ended up wasting a lot of time. Now, if you remember, for those of you who listened to that episode that I did on that map in Path of Radiance, I played defense for it like crazy. I was jerking that map off like it was nobody's business. And I still stand by, I actually re-listened to it recently, I still stand by every single thing that I said in that episode. I think that map is a good map. It is one of my favorites in the game. It may have ended up as my favorite from Path of Radiance when all was said and done. I don't fully remember. But I do fully understand why people don't like them, or why people don't like that map, etc., etc. The reason I'm bringing that up, of course, is because we now have a nearly identical map. This time we're moving from left to right, and there are a couple other more subtle differences. For one thing, the positioning of the pitfalls is a little bit more awkward, to the point where it's actually I think there's a... Hold on a second. Let me... FE10 Pitfall Bridge. Okay, yeah. So there's a spot on... it's about halfway up the map where the way that the pitfalls are laid out, and there's also a shine barrier that someone puts down. I don't know how long the shine barriers last when used by the enemies. I'm going to double check that real quick, because I remember that I've had playthroughs where okay, it says 5 turns. I guess you just have to wait 5 turns, and I was just being impatient. I've had playthroughs where it feels like, because of the shine barrier placement, that they stall you out for a really, really long time. Which is frustrating for sure. That's the only place where I think it happens, but it is still obnoxious. I mean, you can still fly over it with flying units. But yeah, the main argument, and I am going to talk about some specific things in this map that I think are worth mentioning. But overall, my argument for this map is the same as it was for the map in Path of Radiance, which is that if you play with game knowledge, if you have the diagram that I'm looking at pulled up, I have this set and ready to go every time I get to this map in my playthroughs of Radiant Dawn. Very helpful. It's from a GameFAQs page, I think. It just shows you where all the pitfalls are. With that knowledge, which, as a reminder, I am factoring in, right? I have had guides up for a bunch of maps in all of these games, right? So I think it's a fair metric to judge by. You can position flyers onto where the pitfalls are, and if a flyer is occupying that space, you can move as many units as you want through that space without triggering the pitfall. Which is a really nice way to give your flyers a little bit of extra utility and make the map easier on yourself if you have that information. Now, of course, not everybody is going to. Not, people who are playing for the first time or playing blind, it's going to end up being a really frustrating experience. I will say, I do think that overall this map's a little bit more annoying. I think predominantly because the game is harder. So the challenge of positioning your units in places where they're going to be able to block those pitfalls is made more frustrating and more annoying than it has to be by the sheer strength and density of the enemies compared to Path of Radiance, where most of the enemies on the bridge map were basically pushovers. So that is definitely something that I think is worth considering. I definitely prefer the Path of Radiance map over the Radiant Dawn map. I will say that much. But I really don't think it's that bad. I think I still had a pretty good time with it. And it's one of those maps where, like, now that I've learned sort of how to game the system effectively, it's gone from one of my least favorite maps, because trust me, I used to hate these maps as well. I don't know if I mentioned it when I was talking about it in Path of Radiance, but I played the game at least once or twice, before learning this information about the Flyers. And so I was right there with people who hated these maps. So I trust me, I get it. I just think, if you haven't tried this Flyer strategy, give it a shot. I think you'll end up liking the map a lot more. Even if you still don't think it's a good map, at the very least, it'll make your experience with it a little bit less miserable, hopefully. Okay, so we get a couple of new units on this map. I almost forgot to talk about them. We haven't had to talk about a new unit in a little bit. And we just talked about Janeth and Oki last episode, so I guess it hasn't been that long. I think, if I'm not mistaken, next episode is the only one in the entire game where we will not have to talk about any new units. Hallelujah, we get one. We get just one where we don't have to talk about anybody. It's going to be so nice. But for right now, let's focus one thing at a time. Let's talk about Tanith and Sigrun. Let's start with Tanith. Tanith is a returning character from Path of Radiance. She is a level 16 Falcon Knight, so pretty close to that tier 3 promotion, especially since we might still have a Master Crown. I think maybe we got a Master Crown in the base this time around. I think I forgot to mention it, but she's fine. She doesn't have particularly high stats, nor does she have amazing growth rates or anything. But she's an okay unit. She has double A ranks, which is nice. She can use basically any weapon that we want to give her at this point. She has an earth affinity, which if she supports with people, that gives her extra avoid. But kind of disappointingly low, particularly speed growth. Her base speed is only 23, which is not even close to capping for the speed cap of Falcon Knight. Yeah, I'm looking at her stats right now. On average, the only thing she caps in tier 2 is skill at 24. She is actually like kind of bulky for a Pegasus Knight. Notably, she does on average cap her she caps her defense in tier 3 as well as her skill and her strength. But not her speed, which is a little bit unfortunate. And you have to get like pretty high for her to be capping those stats. I think the earliest is defense at tier 3 level 12 on average. So really not anything special in the stat department. But she's perfectly serviceable, right? I think she's just another one of those units, and you're going to hear me say this a lot. She's another one of those units that suffers from low availability prior to part 4, where we get units that are going to outclass her in basically every way. So it's a little bit of a shame, but she does have she has a couple chapters to grow, and she is. She makes decent use out of that experience, I guess. You can also just promote her instantly if you want like a reasonably decent Seraph Knight. I think the real tragedy here is with Sigrun. Let me take a look at Sigrun, because ooh boy, I remember her being kind of stinky. Sigrun is a character who was not playable in Path of Radiance. She has been an important character since Path of Radiance. We actually met her, I think, either at the same time or before even meeting Tanith. And she's just been, she's been around. She's been basically Sanaki's right-hand woman, which is nice. Sorry, I got distracted by finding out that she has a bridal alt in FE Heroes. Sorry, real quick, I gotta take a look. Okay, that's a nice outfit. Okay, sorry, where was I? She's got pretty bad stats, unfortunately. She has, like, slightly... Hold on, let me compare her to Tanith. Give me a second. So she joins 3 levels higher than Tanith, but with either worse stats in most areas or either worse stats or only very slightly better. And on top of that, she has really bad growth rates. For a character we're getting at this stage in the game, she has 45% strength, 25% speed, only 10% defense, which is way lower. I think, Tannis was 40. The only thing that she has on Tanith in the growth department, she has like slightly higher HP, significantly higher resistance, for what that's worth. And then like a 70% luck growth, which like who gives a fuck? Sigrun is like kind of terrible in this game, to be in all honesty. One level before promotion to tier 3, and she has stats that are just downright like mediocre. I want to take a look at her average stats, if she caps anything. Yes, so she caps her luck at level 11 tier 3, yippee, or level 10 tier 3, on average. And then if you put in the work to get her to level 16 tier 3, she caps her resistance, and then her skill at level 18 promoted. She will have pretty mediocre stats across the board and everything else. Well, relatively anyway. It's not like she's terrible, right? Like, her stats can work, but she doesn't have any kind of like interesting niche, or like, does she even join with any skills? No, she doesn't have any. Like, what were they cooking with like both of these guys? But Sigrun in particular is just like really bad. Like pretty bad. I don't really see what the point of this is. You know, you've had way longer to use Marcia in this game. You've had Tanith and Marcia. You've had the opportunity to get attached to them in gameplay in Path of Radiance. They really needed to do something to make Sigrun stand out. Maybe even have her join as a Seraph Knight. I think that actually would have made a lot of sense. Like a level 1 or 2 Seraph Knight, and give her like good stats would also probably help. There's a couple things they could have done, but it is it is what it is, as the kids say. Not really a huge fan of either of these guys. I think Tanith is like perfectly workable, but neither of them are really winning any awards. It is worth mentioning that there is a triangle attack in this game, and you can trigger it with. It needs to be the traditional triangle attack formation, where it's one character around each of the the enemy and adjacent squares. But you can actually complete the triangle attack with any combination of 4 Pegasus Knights. They include Alencia as part of the triangle attack, which is pretty neat. But it is still only the 3. I don't know how it decides if all 4 of them are around the enemy. I don't know how it decides which 4 get to do it, but I don't know. I don't think I've ever done it, to be honest with you. Okay, and then the only other thing that's worth talking about for this map is Tibarn. So Tibarn joins a couple turns in as a yellow unit, and he's just really strong and kills a bunch of guys. That's really like the long and short of it. He does bring along Leanne. Leanne is our Heron for this chapter, which is pretty nice. I think she's a little bit better than Rayson in this context, especially with the narrow gaps between sandbags and things like that. I think she can use her 2 spaces of singing to really good effect here. You do have to obviously be careful with her, because just about any hit will put her out of commission. The narrative explanation for this is that Rayson really wanted to come, but Tibarn didn't want him to. I guess he's not feeling well or something like that. He had to strap him to the bed, I think is what he says, which pause, but it's a cool change of pace. We've been playing as oh fuck, I completely forgot to mention something. The Crimean Royal Knights are officially joined as part of Ike's group now, so we can use Kieran and Marcia and Danved. Khalil is there. Astrid and Makalov are the ones that we get. We noticeably do not have Joffrey, and we also don't have Lucia. There's not really a good explanation given for either of those characters being absent. But I guess eventually later there will be, I think. But for right now, we just have to assume that they just didn't want us to get them for some reason. I'm not really sure. So yeah, I brought Marcia to this map. She's the only Crimean Royal Knight that I'm actively using, so that's pretty nice. This is also where I know a lot of people like to use Kieran in this game. This is where you would get Kieran back for helping get through the rest of part 3, which is nice. I say the rest of the part 3. This is actually the second to last Ike map of part 3, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. Okay, the bonus experience turn requirement, as I said, just like the past couple of chapters and the couple of chapters coming up, 10 turns for full, and then 15 turns for half. The only real thing you have to worry about on this, I mean, there's a couple of strong enemies. The boss, a few of the enemies on the map, and then also the boss have crossbows. And I swear to God, I have seen Tibarn run up to this boss, attempt to kill him, and eat shit on this crossbow. It has happened to me, I think probably more than once. Crossbows in this game are terrifying. They it's insane how strong they are in the hands of the enemies. In your hands, fuck you. You don't really have any good targets to use them on for the most part. But the enemies, oh god, yeah. Any Pegasus Knights, any Bird Lagus, yeah, they're just fucked. Herons, not that herons probably just die anyway, I guess, but still. Okay, I think that's everything that I wanted to talk about. I'm trying to skirt through this pretty quickly. Because it's getting pretty late and I want to wrap up. But also because most of what I have to say about this map is stuff I've already said in the previous iteration of it from the last game. So I think that's really all that there is to say. As far as the story goes, it becomes pretty obvious to Dane that they're losing. It cuts to Soth and Micaiah discussing sort of what to do next. And Micaiah orders a full retreat. There is a representative for the Benyon senators there, who basically say, no, don't retreat, blow up the bridge or something like that. And she's like, no, a lot of people from Dane would die if we did that. And they get into a little bit of an argument about it. But ultimately, Micaiah, puts her foot down and says, no, we're not blowing up the bridge. And that's basically how it ends. Oh, she collapses. She faints from overexertion. We saw something similar happen in a chapter, I think towards the end of part 1. But she seems to be doing okay. She's stable at the very least. But Soth is of course very worried about her, about why this is happening. The note that we end the chapter on, I almost didn't mention it because it's not like that important, all things considered, but I figured, it might be good to have an explanation for what's going on anyway. The Herons seem to be hearing some sort of call coming from Dane. And so, Leanne's already on her way there. Raphael and Rayson both decide that they're going to head over in the direction of Dane as well so that they can all meet up there. Nyla is there as well. She's going to go along with them. So this is just sort of an explanation for... I mean, it's also setting up some stuff for the story that's going to happen later, but when we eventually see Rayson and Raphael in Dane, that is the explanation for why. All right, and that's where we're going to end for today. 3-9 is probably my favorite chapter this time around. I don't know what it is about the bridge map this time that just kind of felt like more lame to play through than the one in Path of Radiance did. It probably is the bridge map, but I can assure you that it is not I don't even know if it's in my top 5 maps in this game, let alone top 1. I think in general the map design in this game is also just better than in Path of Radiance. So it has stiffer competition than the one in Path of Radiance did. That's probably also what it is. But yeah, doesn't really matter. 3-6 is still the reigning champ of the map gauntlet for this game. Okay, now let's get into the news. There is a lot to talk about. We got that Fire Emblem Direct at the time I'm recording this. Yesterday is when the Direct was, and we found out a lot of information about what the gameplay is going to look like, what the structure of the game is going to look like. We found out that the story's true protagonist is the Avatar, that they're going to suck your dick like they do in every game. Listen, I know this is a hill that everybody is dying on right now. I'm far from the only person complaining about this, so I'm not going to dwell on it too much. Saying that Eshmel is the story's true protagonist was just terrible wording that they should have thought through a little bit better. Even in their like follow-up like Twitter post or whatever it was about the about the game. They used that same language of about Ishmael being the story's true protagonist, which is just, it feels so shitty, right? Like, I get what they're trying to say. You know, they're like the ultimate conflict of the story is this this plot about the demon lord getting brought back, right? And then seemingly everything else is just kind of like set up for that. But that in itself just feels so shitty, right? Like it's saying that the implication is that the stories of everything that's going on, you know, in the heroic games and with the other four protagonists and all that stuff, it's not going to matter at the end of the day, and or at the very least, like, it's all going to come down to the same point. And that's just shitty, right? It just makes me feel like what I'm doing in the past doesn't matter. So leave it to intelligent systems to find a way to, you know, I definitely wouldn't say my hype for the game is dead or anything like that. I'm still very much looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a fun gameplay experience. I think I'm cautiously optimistic about the story. I'm hoping that at least the parts that take place in the past will be enjoyable, even if it does end up feeling pointless in the end, right? Like, as long as I still get some good character interactions and you know, good story beats for the protagonist that I actually can see myself giving a shit about, I think that's really all that I can hope for. But man, I'm definitely less excited now than I was, you know, 2 weeks ago, for what that's worth. But I'm still looking forward to it. I'm still going to buy the game on day one, you know, at the end of the day, so what does it matter? But I will say it's nice to know that we don't have to choose between protagonists. I mean, I think, you know, the route split idea is something that it felt like they were really trying to capitalize on in the marketing. But they never explicitly said that was going to be true, I don't think. So, you know, I guess we jump to conclusions, right? And I definitely think from a quality of life standpoint, it is better to not have to do the same shit over and over again. I think that's you know, starting 4 entirely new separate playthroughs for the game, I think would be a bit lame. So I'm glad we don't have to do that. Even if I guess it would probably end up being a pretty similar experience overall. But okay, I think that's all I wanted to talk about. I've been playing. The main thing that's been dominating my life for the past week, and why I haven't read any Blue Lock, is that I've been playing a shitload of Fields of Mystria. The 1.0 update for the game dropped today. And I was playing a lot, you know, leading up to that in preparation for it, and then I played a good bit of it today as well. They have added marriage to the game. They've added children, so there's a lot more to do now than there was. I mean, that's not, honestly, there was already a shitload to do for a game that was technically labeled as early access. It was like 90% complete even before 1.0 came out. So yeah, it's cool to see though that you know, the amount of effort that was put into polishing things up for the 1.0 release. And I'm sure there's going to be more, you know, that needs to get fixed, or that they, you know, new content that they want to add to the game, all that good stuff. So I'm looking forward to future content updates as well. You should try it out. It is as I said, it is a Harvest Moon like game. You know, or I guess maybe now the current generation is probably more familiar with Stardew Valley as sort of their baseline for that experience. I feel like such a boomer saying that, but no, I grew up on Harvest Moon. I was, you know, 12 or 13 playing Friends in Mineral Town, staying up until 3 a.m, you know, doing all that farm shit. And Stardew Valley, I love Stardew Valley to death. In some ways, I think it is actually the superior experience between Stardew and Fields of Mystria. I think they both kind of achieve different vibes for what they're going for, which I think is good, right? Like, I think that is that's sort of the ideal scenario, if you ask me, where they both still have value as experiences. But anyway, I think that's all from me for today. Let me know which route you are most looking forward to, if they even can be still called routes, I guess. Which protagonist story are you most interested in Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave? Are you most looking forward to? Do you expect to be your favorite, etc.? Yeah, let me know at I'm Emily Kirby, Twitter and Blue Sky, turnwheelpodcast@gmail.com, or leaving a Spotify comment. Yeah, I think that's all for me. So I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.